And I'm Aaron Alexander. Welcome to Ramp Riding. It's vertical stunts that separate the pros from the schmoes, and with the right practice and determination, you too can become airborne.
Just remember that all the skaters in this tape are trained professionals who have practiced many years. Never attempt a ramp without proper supervision and all of your safety equipment.
I fell off a ramp once and broke my arm. It isn't fun. You can get hurt.
This is safe. You don't crack your head open and look like this.
Chuck Dinkins coming to you live. We're almost live. It's a videotape, so it's not really live, but it's live because we're here now, but you're watching a tape, so it wasn't live yet. But anyway, many of the top level skaters feel that vertical is the way to be. So let's go to Rob Glenn in Miami. Rob?
That's right, Chuck. It's the perfect natural high. It comes with a complete head rush, a hint of danger, dramatic speed, and amazing grace. Stretching is very important before you skate, because if your feet fall off or anything while you're coming across a flat at first, before you're warmed up, you could pull your muscles and strain them very badly. So just remember to stretch, and if you start stretching while you're young and keep it into old age, when you're older you won't be so stiff.
An earmark of an accomplished skater is the breeze he displays on simple tricks like the fakie. As you approach the first wall, bend your knees and center your hips. At the point of impact, pump the wall. That means thrust your hips up the transition. Do not stand up on the board. A fakie is when you push up the ramp forward and you come down backwards. You make sure your weight is always centered over the board. And you have to learn how to pump as well. It's the best way to learn how to pump, doing fakies. And make sure when you're going backwards, you're always looking back so you know where you're going. And you start at the bottom and work your way up high. A backside 180 you usually learn after a fakie. It's when you turn backside. You should start at the bottom of the ramp and work your way up, always bending your knees, and try to keep your head where the nose of the board is. Always keep your eyes that way. And always try to look where you're going. And make sure you try to put the wheels down so you don't ride a wheelie down the first time. And keep trying a series of them until you work your way to the top. Frontside 180, you learn after the backside usually. And that's when you go up and you're turning with your face actually towards the ramp. You go up and you have to make sure your head is looking where you're going. And you turn the other way, and it's a little bit harder because you can't really see where you're going at first, but with a little bit of practice, you'll be able to do it. And just make sure you put the wheels down hard on the way down so you don't ride a wheelie down. And the best way is to keep doing them in succession and work your way up to maybe doing a frontside grind. A fakie 360 you learn on the bottom of the ramp. Try to learn at the bottom and make sure that you can do a 360 first. As you're going backwards, you start and you turn. Make sure your eyes are always looking at probably the nose of your board so you can see where it's going, and continue your motion all the way around and put your wheels down till you finish the motion and keep on going. This trick can lead into many other tricks. To do a backside grind, first of all, you have to be able to get to the top of the ramp, so I hope you practice all the other fundamentals. When you're getting to the top, you always have to make sure you know where your wheels are. And it's kind of like eyes in the back of your head, because on the backside it's hard to see your wheels. So you kind of have to look back and make sure you get your feeling more than anything. And as you're going up, you can feel it grind, and make sure that you get that feeling like you're not going to go all the way over so you don't hook up on the way in. And the best way to do it is just to keep doing them wall to wall. Frontside grind is going the other way, which is a little bit harder, but it's one of the most popular tricks in skateboarding on vertical. Frontside grind, you come up at a carve, and you can see where you're going. That's what's fun about it. And as you're coming up, you can feel the truck grind. You kind of push with your foot, and just make sure you don't hook up. You can see what you're doing, so you can always bail if you're going to hook up. As you're coming in, just make sure you put the wheels down soon enough so you don't ride a wheelie down when you're learning them. And the best way to learn it is to keep doing them from wall to wall. An elevator drop is probably the first drop you learn in from the top of the ramp. And it's done by placing your tail here, placing your back foot here and your front foot here. And to learn it, you usually should hold the nose a little bit as you're going in. And just make sure you take all your weight and you slap that wheel down so you don't ride a wheelie down again. And the best way, after you've done it once, it's easy every time. An axle drop is your next dropping you usually learn after an elevator, and it's a little bit harder, but it's probably
the most popular of the two. And you learn it by placing both axles on top of the coping. Get a good footing, make sure your feet are in the right place, and as you turn to go in, make sure you have weight on the back wheels. And as soon as you feel this wheel start to come in and going in, put that wheel down. Make sure you push down so your truck doesn't slip over and you hook up on the way in, because it could hurt. I should explain an axle stall before a 50-50. Definitely, right, Ed? How am I going to explain? Approach at maximum speed.
Okay.
Tell me when you're ready.
Ready.
An axle stall is like the second part of an axle drop. As you're coming up the wall, you lift up the wheels and you try to plant this here and land like this with all your weight right, getting you in a position of an axle drop. And then of course you go back in just like an axle drop. This takes a little bit of time to learn because you have to get your timing right. Sometimes you'll come up and go like this, or you won't make it up to the top. So just take your time practicing this one and make sure your truck's always on before you go in. You don't want your wheel like this because it could hurt. A 50-50 is kind of like an axle stall, but you're always in motion on the coping. You have to come up at a big carve with a lot more speed. And make sure you have your balance and make sure both trucks are on. And on a 50-50, you don't have to really turn in so hard. You can almost carve in. You just have to lift up a little bit. And the less you lift up and coming in, the more speed you're going to get coming in. Practice this one and make sure you have your pads on for all these maneuvers. Okay, a rock and roll is when you come up like this in the forward position. And as you're turning in, you put weight on your back tail and kind of lighten up on the front and turn in. And you got to turn in fast so your wheels don't slide so much coming in. This one takes a lot of practice, and it's a good setup trick or when you mess up after something. A rock and roll fakie. This one's probably one of the scariest of the rock and rolls. You come up like this, and you rock, and as you're rocking in, you make sure you tilt it back enough, putting weight on the tail so your front wheels don't hit on the way in. And always looking back so you know where you're going. You don't want to rock in looking forward. The board will shoot right out from under you. And this will lead you into another trick, which is called the 360 rock and roll. So you're coming up backwards now. Hope you learned your 360 from the first part at the bottom, because now you're doing it at the top. You have to do your 360 and a 180. Come up like this, into the rock and roll, and then turn back in. This is a pretty fast motion. You have to do it pretty fast. If you do it slow, it doesn't look so good. A frontside rock and roll is probably one of the hardest rock and rolls of the whole bunch, and it's the most scary. As you're coming up, you come up straight. Sometimes it helps to even come up at a little bit of an opposite angle. You take your feet are on the board, and as you're coming up, you have to twist your back foot like this to keep weight on this inside wheel. And meanwhile, make sure this arm is out so your body stays looking this way. And as you're turning in, you have to come in kind of quick and make sure these front wheels don't hit the coping on the way in, because it could hurt if you fall. And just come in with the motion. The best way to learn it is on a curb, then bring it to a mini ramp, and then bring it to a big ramp. Make sure you're wearing pads for this one too. Slides are one of the most fun things in vertical skating. They enable you to slow down or to stop going up to the top. It lets you drift. You get this feeling of like floating on the wall. Like Ed doing the 360 slide here. He puts his hands on the coping. And slides also are really tricks. They started just after the 180. And after the 180 and the frontside 180, you usually learn slides, like a cess slide. And now we're going to go ahead and describe some slides to you. I'm going to show you a cess slide, which is done by the unweighting and weighting of both feet over the trucks. Here we go. A cess slide is learned by coming up the ramp, carving front side a little bit, and as you're coming up, unweight your back foot, sliding the back up 90 degrees, rolling backwards a little bit, and then sliding the front down 90 degrees and coming in straight. That finishes your assess slide. The slide fakie, you carve up backside, and as you're coming up, you place this hand on the coping. You slide the front this way, and then you put weight on the back wheels and slide the back down, meanwhile pushing off with your hand to get your weight back centered over the board, and you roll down backwards, always looking where you're going. Fakie slide to fakie. You come up backwards and kind of carve front side. You slide up the nose, putting more weight in the back, slide up the nose, put this hand down on the top if possible, slide the nose, keep slide the nose around, and as the nose gets all the way over to here, then you unweight the back and slide the back down, pushing off with the hand and rolling down backwards, always making sure you're looking where you're going. The next slide I'm going to show you is a variation of a rock and roll and a slide. It's called a 1-2-3. You do a rock and roll backside. As you're turning halfway in, you put your leading hand down and slide the back wheels down backwards. I'll show you now. The backside air is learned by coming up the ramp. You can learn at the bottom first, but then you have to bring it to the top. When you're coming up to the top of the ramp, you want to try and have quite a bit of speed. You start popping the board into your hand about right here. Make sure you grab around this range. This is where most people grab. And pop off. And the pop is what sticks the board to your feet, and then you have control here. And as you turn to come in, always try and get the nose in, coming pretty straight. You don't want to overturn or underturn too much. A frontside air is done by coming up the ramp. It's best to carve. As you're coming up the ramp, you grab with your back hand about right here. And you pull off about when your front wheels hit the cope and you start pulling off. It's best to learn them pretty low and work your way up. And as you're pulling off, you kind of guide the nose around. And what's good about it is you can always see where you're going. And when you're coming in, just make sure you release and kind of start straightening your legs out on the way down. To do a mute air, you have to make sure you grab the inner side of the board around your knee. And as you're coming up, you pop it a lot like a backside air. And just pop around and come on in. You can do Japan airs, and you do gay twists the same way too. An Indy air, you grab the inner side of your board. Usually grab around this range. Well, you can grab anywhere you want, but usually around here. You grab and you pull off pretty hard. And it's weird because your head's kind of in lower than your board is. So you just kind of get used to that feeling being a little bit inverted. And on the way in, just make sure you see your wheels and release just right so you don't hook up. A lean air, you carve up front side. It's best to carve a lot on it. You grab the outer side of your board, usually grab around right here. And it's kind of like you want to really pop it into your hand so you can kind of guide it. You guide the back around with your back feet. And on the way in, you can see where you're going on this so you know where your wheels are. Just land and let go and ride it off. This next one is a lean to tail, and we're going to watch Jason do this one for you. It's a little bit like a lean air, but you come in slapping the tail on the way down. As you go up, you grab the nose of the board, pop off, you kind of kick that back leg out and make that tail slap while holding the nose. And as soon as it slaps, you can let go and go on in. Just make sure you're on it because you don't want your balance off on the way in. Go for it, Jason. A Madonna's like a lean to tail, but you kick your front foot off and you kick it behind you. When you're coming up the ramp, right when you start to get about to this position, that's when you want to get that leg off and kick it behind you. And you want to get it back on about the time you land. Make sure that foot's on the way down because it can be a disaster if it falls off. Once again, here's Jason to show you how. To do an invert, you come up the ramp backside. As you're coming up, you grab the inside. You got to grab the inside of the board. But first of all, you kind of pop out, grab the board, and plant this hand on the top. You got to make sure it's planted well. And you kind of always look at your hand and try and torque the board up over you. And when you're coming in, just make sure the wheels don't hit. It's best learned on a small ramp, and then you work your way up to the big ramp. That way, if you fall, you don't have so far to fall. And just make sure you have your helmet and all your pads on.
Ready.
An eggplant is probably one of the difficult inverts of the bunch. As you're coming up, you grab the inside of the board, but you got to really pop it, grab like an Indy Air, and plant your front hand. You have to get used to planting this front hand on this because it feels awkward at first. And just kind of make sure you come in away from your hand. You can either come in on this side or do a full carve and come in on this side. But just make sure you don't hit your hand on the way in and push off. Here's Ed to tell you about the Andrecht, one of the funnest hand plants.
Well, the Andrecht is basically an invert variation. Instead of grabbing the inner rail, you grab the outer rail. The way I perform this trick is I approach the lip with speed and shoot straight out. As soon as I shoot straight out, I arch my body towards my back and pull the board back in, thus to perform the re-entry and just free fall back in.
We're going to show you how to do the frontside invert, which is probably one of the first ones done. It's one of the funnest, and wouldn't you agree that Steve Cavallero probably does the best ones?
Oh, indeed, Rob.
Yeah, but Ed's going to explain it to you, and he's going to show you too, and I think he does some pretty good ones too.
Well, the way I perform this trick is I approach the lip with speed and shoot straight up. The way I recommend if you want to learn this trick is you kind of do it like a frontside air and kind of arch your back and just plant your hand and free fall back in like a frontside air. That's the best way to learn it.
Make sure you push off with that hand on the way in to get your
Yes,
entry.
you don't want to hook up.
You don't want to hook up on that. And just make sure you have all your pads on, just like every other trick you're learning in this series, because when you're learning these tricks, you tend to fall a lot, and that's the only way to save you so you can eventually do them.
Let's take a breather and watch some of the pros in action.
This will be a Miller flip. I hope he makes it. Uh-oh, and down. As performed by this guy from Detroit, backside boneless. Yes. The sun factor is definitely a problem. Here comes the sun.
Yeah. Whoops. Before skating at any time, especially on vertical, you should always make sure that your mounting hardware is very tight and there's nothing loose and nothing's about to fall off, because you don't want it to fall off here because it can lead to a serious injury that can't be prevented just by checking. These tricks you see in this video are hard enough doing them straight. If you're taking drugs of any kind, they will virtually be impossible and you could really get hurt. Make sure you wear your pads and you always skate straight.
Hi, we're in Phoenix, Scottsdale. Actually, we're in Paradise Valley, Arizona, where it's very hot. We're in the middle of a desert. Anyway, I'm sitting here with Bruce Walker, owner and operator of Walker Skateboards, Ocean Avenue Manufacturing, Ocean Avenue Surfboards, and the Walker Ocean Avenue Surf Skate Showroom. That's in Melbourne, Florida, on 5th Ave. Actually, it's in in the Atlantic, Florida, which is kind of by Melbourne Beach. But anyway, go by and buy something if you're ever in the Florida area. But Bruce, tell me, what's the difference between vertical styles and other styles? What's the big difference?
Well, I would say that the thing that most singularly separates vertical skating from other types of skating would be the commitment that a skater has to make both mentally and physically. Vertical skating, I think, overall is a lot scarier, and it takes getting your mental frame of mind set. I think that the skaters that do pursue vertical and do well at it typically find themselves a little better equipped to do other aspects of skateboarding. I think they can fit into a lot more situations if they're really adept at vertical. But I'd say mainly the commitment.
We've provided most of the education. The rest is up to you.